I have a million questions just from Edgar's reading, and I've read this book in Hebrew and English and Hebrew. I know this book well. But again, I wasn't kidding about us bumping into each other and having to run here. And I know Etgar well enough to know these events don't. These events just don't work if you're not really yourself up here, and you're all kind enough to come out, and everybody's really busy. So we just will be ourselves. But Etgar, I have not Tanchumai. I have not seen Etgar since his father passed away a few weeks ago, and they had a very special relationship, and he was a very special man. And this is my first opportunity to ask how you're doing, or ask if you want to talk about your dad.
I talk about my dad. That's easier. Should I bring the microphone for? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Great. This way they can hear us better. So I wanted to say that I was kind of a bit ambiguous about going on a tour because my father died 5 weeks ago, and my mother talked me into coming into going, and I kind of made myself this rule that every event that I have, I'll find some sort of an excuse to tell a story about my father, something. So there are so many stories about him, but I don't know. I thought about, since I'm going to tell only ones, maybe ones that for me kind of captures something about him. It's my father had a throat cancer. It was basically a base of a tongue cancer, but what happened with the tumor is that when it got bigger and bigger, he couldn't eat or drink, so he was directly fed to his stomach, and the doctor didn't allow him to drink anything because any liquid he would take would go directly to his lungs, and it was just dangerous. And I've been with my father since he was ill every day, so we would hang out a lot, and we go to doctors, or sometimes we would just kind of go for a walk. And whenever we would pass next to a cafe, my father would say to me, "A cafe?" And I said, "Yes, Dad, but you can't drink." And he said, "But you can drink. Let's sit for a little bit." My father always loved sitting in cafes, so I would sit with him together, and it was like a ritual because it happened 40 times, And when the waitress would come, I would order Diet Coke, and just a second before she would go away, my father would say, "And a double espresso." And I'd look at my father because he's not allowed to drink, and he would go like, "What can you do?" So she would come back with Diet Coke and the double espresso, and my father would kind of go for it really quickly, because before somebody would notice that he has a coffee and he's not supposed to, and he would take it down like in a shot. And what would happen was that the coffee would go straight to his lungs, so he would start kind of like suffocating, go very loud, and it's very scary. And the people in the cafe would get up, and is there a doctor, and what should we do? And it would take like something like 15 seconds, and when he finished doing it, he would just kind of bend down, and it would all come out. I don't know if threw it up or spit it, but it would all come out on the floor just next to where we were sitting. And then he would sit down, take out a cigarette, light it, and he would say to me, "Good damn coffee." And just to say that why I think it's my dad, because he kind of didn't take shit from anybody. Like, he would do things his way always.
That makes me want to ask more family questions, and I will. We'll stay familial. We're in Shul. It's community feeling.
But actually, that's fun. I never got to meet Etgar's father, but I do have one image of. I got to see them. I woke up. I was on tour in Germany or something, and I woke up and turned the TV on, and it was much like the story Etgar just read. It was Etgar hanging out with his father and talking whatever. And it took me like a couple of minutes waking up in the morning in that real natural setting to understand that they were talking in English. They had you both like as if they hang out, and speak not in their language. But it took me a couple of minutes to be like, that's not what they talk to each other. Just a day at home. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, that's the journalist from the story? That's funny. The story made me think of the real... You don't usually get the story behind the story, but I was like, this is so natural, except for being unbelievably unnatural. So, and maybe we'll talk about the story that you gave me from your father, which is a whole separate story. But as long as I'm talking about it, I guess if you talked about your mom sending you on tour, what's it... we spend so much time in the road. I mean, maybe if we'll stay on the road for a second, but what is it like? Etgar also has a beautiful son named Lev, who always asks his father when I only speak Hebrew to Etgar. Once a year I speak Hebrew just to Etgar. It's like I have a private language for him. But his son always asks, like, what's wrong with Nathan? Does he have a cold or is he sick? And Etgar always just say that's an accent. He just always, it's true. We were days together and he just said, like, we couldn't figure it out. Something my brain, exactly. Sicker than that. Anyway, but yeah, I guess touring as a parent, maybe. Oh, that really helps.
They gave me a wireless one. They like me better.
I think so. You're the main attraction. Nachon.
Downgraded again.
Yeah. We'll skip to literature in a second. But I guess, spending all this time on the road as a parent, or what that's like for you, or...
It's very tough for me, to travel now as I'm a father, but my son is very used to it, so it's kind of easy with it. But since my father became ill, I didn't travel for a long time, and when I had to go this time, I was a little bit stressed, because I thought, if I disappear or something. So I called my son and I said to him, listen. They offered me to do this kind of a lecture tour, to go and work overseas for 2 weeks, but they said they won't pay me any money. But if I do really good, they give me an iPad. What do you say? Should I do it? And he said to me, like, go, father, go.
That's funny.
And I already bought the iPad and hid it in my socks drawer.
The traditional father hiding place, I guess, never changes. I don't know.
The kinky ones put it in the underwear drawer.
Exactly. But your underwear were in Frankfurt, so it would just be empty. I guess hearing you read that story, and again makes me think of that piece in Germany. And then you say that's where it come from. I guess the space, both the first story in this book and the last story in this book, both sort of have an Etgar in them. I guess I just wanted to know. There's just such an, it was talked about in the introduction, but Etgar's book, I love them from the first. I remember getting the first one in Jerusalem. I have a stolen copy of Gagaway Kissinger that I won't ever return, that a friend lent me, and I just kept it. But there's just such a specific, there's the Hebrew idea of like dibur dugru, or straight talk. There's a reason I wanted to translate Etgar to even play with it in English myself. There's just such an intimacy and such a straight talk feeling. It's beyond conversational. It's just coming from very specific human, discursive place. And I guess I just want to know where the narrators are in your head. Like, where are you in space-time? Let's go from family to metaphysics.
I'm not sure I understood who you ask, who are the characters?
No, there's millions of different, and if English was your first language, you still wouldn't understand me. I guess I want to know where we're saying we both write, we both work with each other's work. I don't know if anybody knows that, but we couldn't figure out a payment schedule. How does Etgar pay me for translating his work? And we decided the only way to pay me was for Etgar to translate my book into Hebrew. So but my point is I've spent so much time in your head now, and I guess it's that writer question that I can't ever ask, but I want to ask you. I guess when you're communicating, your readers are here. Like, what space are you in? Where is it coming from? Tonally, spiritually? You pick the spot, but...
Well, I think that for me, the place of writing is the place of this kind of ultimate freedom, this kind of liberty. It's the place where you can be who you are, and and when I write, I don't have any idea what I'm writing. It's kind of, I think the best metaphor that I have for it is you know this kind of thing called the trust falls. When couples they go to counseling and they ask each of them to fall back with his eyes closed, and the other one is supposed to catch him, is supposed to trust her, and that's with me writing is kind of a trust fall. Like I close my eyes and I fall back, and I hope that the story will catch me. You know, I don't have any idea what I'm doing, but basically when it works, the thing that comes out is me. And I think in real life it's much more difficult because everything kind of has consequences. You know, it's if you can't always say what you want or do what you want or be attracted to what you want. You know, just because you can hurt people, you can hurt yourself, you can get into trouble. And for me, the beauty of fiction is that it's this kind of space that whatever you feel, it's legitimate. It has no consequences. And I feel that all the characters that I write, even the ones that I don't really like, they're me.
And then one more question about that space again. I think maybe the most in this book, but so also plot-wise and stuff. This is the highest compliment. There'll be sort of strange things happening in a story or nothing happening in the stories, and then this is when I love work in a sense that's the work I love most is the work that I sort of can't understand why it's working for me. That's like Carver. I never cry from stories, and it's Carver's Cathedral, which is it presses every button. It shouldn't work at all, and then I'll be like, got me again. I just take it apart in my head. But these stories, again, they're strange or they're surreal. I have two more questions about it actually. I said it was just going to be one, but I'm just filled suddenly. They just take this turn. The end comes, and I'm just filled with honestly just such a deep and beautiful sadness or hopefulness or love. Or it's just there's just this switch, and I love that idea where it's just this amorphous. You can't really tell what happened, but on your front, are you just is it just this to pitch, to tone, to feel?
I think that for me a story is basically a tone because when I write a story, it usually begins from an image or a sentence or some sort of kind of feeling that I cannot articulate in words. And it just kind of trying to keep that tone, and usually when it works, the plot or even the situation presents itself. And I think that the strongest drive that I have for writing is basically curiosity. I'm kind of my passion for writing comes from basically being a reader of my stories who knows that those stories must be written so I can read them. And I think that's why they're so short, because I'm a very impatient reader, So whenever I kind of start writing a story and I start kind of describing a tree, that is, and I say, come on, leave this tree. Come on, I don't want to hear about the tree. What's going to happen next,
Well, then about that motion, I guess, fiction can't, we are not literary professors, we're writers, that's what we do. But so my point is I don't do, it's magic realism, it's this, I don't care about those categories at all. That's not how I stack shelves. I don't stack them by style or by race or by culture. I feel like there's always this, overwhelming need to categorize that's very limiting. But a story, even if a story is about chaos, if the story is called chaos and it's all chaos, it must have order to it. It must have this rules to a world. And one thing that Etgar does, the challenges to his stories are just massive in the worlds he sets up. Maybe, I would ask you, say, to sort of talk about a story like Liland, and then talk about the rules to your worlds are impeccable. You don't break them. I consider these stories, I don't care if people are flying or getting sucked down tubes or turning, women turning into men at midnight. They're hyper-realistic stories to me because the emotion's realistic and the worlds, the feelings are realistic and that sort of. So I guess maybe set up a story like Liland for the audience, what it is, and then talk about how you build the rules of your worlds.
Well, one thing I must say about the rules, because, we're talking about Liland, so it's a good opportunity to say that I see myself as an excellent liar. I'm a very good liar, and when you lie, you need to have a lot of rules, because the problem is that when you lie, you have to be consistent. You know, if you say something, you can't say anything that contradicts it. And the easy and boring thing about the truth is that you shouldn't remember anything. You don't need to have any rules. And I must say that again, I lie in life, but I don't lie in my stories. So I really don't need rules. You know, they just work because that's what they are. And because I talked about lies, so the story of in Liland is basically about a person who discovers some sort of a gate to a world where he first meet his first lie, which means every lie that he had made in his life was created in that word. So if he said, I was late to work because I hit a dog, so there is a limping dog in that word. If he say, you know, everything that he says, basically, lying is a work, is some sort of a creation. Yeah. And what happened is that he goes to this world of lies, and through that he kind of starts assuming some responsibility for his lies. And I think that he kind of differentiates between lies that are harmful, like let's say if you say I couldn't come because my upstairs neighbor was beating his wife and I had to call the police, then you created a wife beater in this word. And lies that maybe can be pleasant, you know, it's like kind of, I don't know, my neighbor flew overseas because her daughter won a prize, you know, and I have to water her flowers, you know. And he, among other things, he discovered that when you make up nice lies, people don't believe them. Because when you say that something horrible happens, everybody believes you. But when you say something nice happens, people get suspicious. But I think that all this kind of creating different lies and categorizing, it has to do with the fact that you know that I really think that lying, in essential, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like a knife. You know, if you stab somebody, the knife is a bad thing, but if you use it to put butter on your bread, it's okay. So I think that many times when you lie, it can come out of kindness. You know, a lie could be a generous lie, it could be a compassionate lie, and kind of sometimes sticking to the truth can be very heartless. So maybe the story is a little bit about my self-justification for the fact that I lie sometimes.
Yes. And I guess if I was talking about categorizations and traditions, and every writer you get this list of, if all is going well, you get compared to a lot of nice people. And often sometimes there's usually, that's how I get my own reading list, is usually you're compared to someone on that list, to be someone you haven't read, and I'm like, I should probably read that person. There's probably a good reason. But anyway, you get...
It's the other way around, because it always kind of scares me, because I'm always afraid that I read somebody that they write very much like me, and then I become his epigon.
Yeah.
Because I would do the same stuff, but I've read it before. So whenever they say somebody writes like me, I would never read him.
But on that question where you always get the Kafka-esque and the Bruno Schultz, I mean, those are obviously high compliments. But are those who are your heroes? Who did you read? Like, do you connect with those people that are linked to you?
Well, I must say that I never wanted to be a writer, and I never wrote anything before I went to the army for my 3 years compulsory service, and strangely enough, the writers I've read during my basic training were Kafka, Babel, and Vonnegut. And I think that they're still my greatest influence. I think that, Kafka, it was very helpful reading him in basic training, because it made me realize that there was at least one person on this earth that was even more fucked up than I was. And Vonnegut, I guess, reading Slaughterhouse 5, I kind of looked for those books that were about other soldiers, because when I looked for those books in the Israeli curriculum, all the soldiers were much better person and better soldiers than I was. But when I really could Vonnegut, it made me really think that, that there was one person in this world that was even a worse soldier than I was. Mm-hmm. And reading Isaac Babel was just amazing.
Those stories are beautiful.
So I think that there was something after reading those, like, 3 different people, it kind of legitimized the fact that that I could write because I think I always loved writing, but I always kind of saw writers as those people who have the answers. And I think that that there's something about those free writers that they are writers that pose questions. But you feel that they are like they're more like they're not this kind of prophet that tells you what should be done. They are like those historical people who hold your shirt and say, "What should we do? What should we do?" So I said, if I could write, I could only write from this position because sadly I don't have all the answers.
I love that answer, I declare to you all. No, it's just sweet. You think there's these weird, the whole way writers mix, like we like the people, but it's usually you fall in love with the writers as people, that you fall in love with their work, and it's in a sense because there's an aesthetic, and I feel like all the people whose writing, started talking about trust, all the people whose writing I trust are the ones, I feel like we all came to it the same way, as you were looking for answers, and what you discovered is the people brave enough to ask questions, and I feel like that's why, Kafka, Conrad, Camus, I just think that's giant. But if I'm already making writer lists, I have been with you in a lot of countries and stuff. I guess I just, if we talk about the Israeli writer list, we all know who, the big players are. And I guess I just want to talk about the strange role of when you have an American, as long as we're in Chicago, there's such a specifically strange role to me of the Israeli writer where they treat you as if you're not here. This is, he's here as Etgar Keret, this guy who wrote this book, but most of the places we go, he's there as if like Netanyahu sent him as deputy, like press secretary. I've seen, first questions, usually it's like pen or pencil, or I have a novel, but with him it's like, do you think Iran is very close to that? So he is also, I want you to know, a full-time working press secretary, and it's just, I guess I just want to know about that strange mantle of being an Israeli writer in the world.
Well, my first event in the U.S., a reading event, I remember that the first question that I got was Ariel Sharon was the prime minister, and they said to me, if you were Ariel Sharon and you woke up tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you do? And I said, a diet? Look, there's something about it. I think that, first of all, when you're a writer and when you're a writer who does reading events, I think that you put yourself in positions that people can ask you questions. So I think, and especially when people come and they're very passionate about the topic or know nothing about the topics, and it's natural that they ask questions about politics. It's just that I think that my answers usually are a little bit confusing, and I think that people, when they ask those questions, they just want some sort of reassurance. Either this reassurance would be that they want them to say what they think, or they want them to say the opposite of what they think and then hate you, or they want them to feel that there's somebody out there who knows the answers, and it's all very human, so even if I cannot assume that role, I never feel kind of embarrassed or angry when they ask me that.
Sure, but what about when it's political, like at the Turin Fair with boycott? I always think it's strange when people boycott the arts because usually the artists are, on the front
boycotts are good. It's when they spit on you that it gets unpleasant. I'm saying it's not a joke. Yeah. It's really, I'm saying it's not a joke that they spit on me, and it's not a joke that it's unpleasant.
Yeah. We won't do that tonight, I hope. No guarantees, there's a balcony. It's just fun from up there. And I guess, I don't know, they have 20 million questions. I have 20 million questions on 20 million topics, so I should probably ask one on each topic. But I guess I want to know on the path to writing, in a sense. Before I was a fan of Etgar, before I was a fan of Etgar's writing, I didn't know I was a fan of Etgar from like Chamisha Kamarit, my favorite sort of TV sketch show. You just have an interesting path towards literary fiction. It usually goes the other way. So I guess I want to hear about, your life in TV or movies or...
Oh, well, it was an Israeli show that was very much like Saturday Night Live, and when they started working on the shows, and the chief writer kind of said to me, "Can you come and write sketches for us?"
How old were you then even? You were a
I
baby.
was 24 or 25, and I said to him, because he read my first collection of short stories, and I said to him, I said to him, I know how to write, but I don't know how to write funny. And he said, it's okay, our show isn't funny, and there was something very nice working for them, because usually when you work in a comedy kind of environments, they always want you to deliver a punchline or something. But with them, they just said, if you write something interesting, we do it. We're late now show and nobody watches us anyway. So there was great freedom in doing stuff for them.
Excellent. I think we better open it up to the audience so that people get to ask you not my questions. Yes, brave soul.
Do you revise things, or do you fall and trust them and they come out perfect the first time?
I repeat the question. The question was if I revise or edit a lot, or if when I finish kind of writing a story, it's just complete, and it changes from one story to another, but many times it takes a lot of work, and this work is kind of very premeditated, and I think about it a lot, and I must say I love writing and I hate editing. There is something very natural about writing, and something very unnatural about editing, but especially, let's say a story like a story I've read today, when you write something in a first person narrative, many times the problem is that there's somebody who's supposed to be speaking to you, but the ideas that he says or presents can be more complex than you could believe than a guy would say on real time. And a lot of the time, the process of editing is to take some of those ideas and kind of make them more nonchalant or unintentional. It's kind of like stonewashing a jeans so it will look older. So because the things that I really don't like is when you write a story and somebody reads the story and he says, "Wow, the guy who wrote it was very smart." Because if you do that, then you failed. Because what you want is that when somebody will read it, you say they shouldn't have killed that dog. You don't want them to notice your existence. And I think a lot of time when you write, then you have a lot of ideas, and the ideas can be very obvious, or you can do those things that can be a little bit flashy, and then you have to kind of clean it up. So in the end, the story will be the thing in the foreground, and not anything that is external.
Yeah, do you think Israel should attack Iran? No, that's not. What I really want to ask is a zillion questions, but one that I'm troubled with is you are being criticized in Israel by using what they call skinny language, like Safar Azal, like Rubik Rosenthal, who I appreciate a lot. I totally disagree with him, but what would you answer for people like they accuse you and Orly Castelblum, writing in very skinny language, so the young generation out there will think that this Hebrew is the norm. I totally disagree, but I would like your answer to that.
So I think, would you say it's a slim language would be the right word for it? Skinny language? How would you say that? Straight talk, okay.
That's not what they mean, straight talk. They mean really that you strip the language from its richness. You're the opposite.
Yeah, minimalist. So yes. So I think that they say it, and basically they invented this term when they started writing about Carver, and I think that. Let's say comparing Carver's writing to Orly Castelblum's writing or to mine is really very strange and very weird. I think that the reasons they put us in the same category, it's basically the people who say it's writers in the category of stories that we don't get. So, but I think that, by the way, that let's say Orly Castelblum's language or mine is anything but minimalistic, because it's just very eclectic. It comes from different places, but Meir Shalev, who's a wonderful Israeli writer and who's an expert who knows so much about the Hebrew language. He said to me, I don't know why they say about you, Novelist, that you have a skin language. He said, because you're the only two writers that when I read, it sends me to the internet to look up for words, because all the other writers, I know all the words. So I don't think that the vocabulary is smaller. If anything, it's greater. But we write in a register that traditionally people didn't used to write in Hebrew, because Hebrew lived for so many years as only a written language, and because it's a holy language, it's like, I'm saying, because when Nathan writes a story and he wants to intimidate himself, he says, my book is going to be there on the bookshelf next to William Shakespeare, So I say, William Shakespeare, my book is going to be next to the Bible, so so there is this kind of stress that when you use Hebrew, one of the reasons that people spoke Yiddish was that it felt inappropriate to ask where the toilets are in that language. So when you write in colloquial speech or when you write in a spoken language, then it annoys people. But I don't think that in any way this language is more limited or more minimalist.
Hi. I wanted to ask, this collection shows a lot more anxiety than your previous collections, and particularly about the act of writing and the act of loss. So losing family, losing children, losing a wife. And I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about this change in your writing.
Yeah, I think that you must first have something so to be scared that you lose it, And I think that somebody who really was, except for being very close to my family and friends, I was kind of a desperado. I don't know. I didn't have. Is it right? It's awesome. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about what's going to happen to me. I just kind of been around, and then suddenly falling in love and getting married and having a family. Suddenly I had so much that I could lose, And I think that the same goes for writing, because I think that for a very long time I felt very safe in writing, and I felt it was this place where I could be myself, and I discovered a lot of things about myself through writing, but I didn't truly appreciate it. It's like, I don't know, when you're a kid and you have great parents, then you don't say, wow, I have great parents, just nice that they're there. And I think that this collection came after a very long time in which I didn't write. And during this time, I kind of learned to appreciate how much I've had, and I guess that I had the great fear of losing those things that I had. So you're right.
We have time for just one more quick question.
Hi. I'm curious about the act of translation. I don't often get to hear an author and a translator at the same time. And perhaps this question applies to both of you, because now I understand that, Etgar, you'll be translating some of Nathan's work. So when that translation happens, did you discover anything new about your writing when you heard it in another language? And maybe both of you could speak to that. Were you surprised by anything that you found in your stories?
Well, I must say that Nathan is not your normal translator. I work with Miriam Schlesinger and Sondra Silverstone, my translators, for a very long time. And Nathan, I think that there should be a title invented for what Nathan is doing, because he kind of, I would say that in a sense he kind of upgrades the story. When he translates, he could say to me, and I did this sentence, and I added this fat man, okay, in the end of the sentence, this fat man enters the room. I hope it is okay, because it seems more complete. In English, it would work better if a fat man would enter the room. And a lot of the stuff that he suggests is just super makes sense, and I say, wow, I wish you would have said that to me before I published it in Hebrew, But Of course, I think there's something about the act of translation that makes you learn a lot about your writing, because there is something about languages. I think that we have this kind of instinct to speaking kind of, when we speak a few languages, that what we want to say is like, I don't know, juice, and you have it in one glass, and then it's Hebrew glass, and then you spill it to the English glass, and basically the glasses look different, but the content is the same. But the languages are not the same, and the verb forms are not the same, and the length is not the same, and sometimes there are words that exist in one language and do not exist in another. You know, I can say to you, for example, the word mind, it doesn't exist in Hebrew. You know, you have brains, you have consciousness, you have soul, but you don't have mind. And there are a lot of words that exist in Hebrew and don't exist in English, but I can't tell them to you because I'm speaking English right now. So I think that there is something about this kind of the act of translation is a little bit kind of almost reinventing the story, and when you do that, a good translator like Nathan basically asks you, why did you use this word? Or this word has three meanings, but in English it only has one. So did you mean it in this sense, or in this sense, or in this sense? So I find it very enlightening to work with a good translator.
Oh, all right. Yeah, that's funny. I remember that. I'm not a translator at all. The point is that of our two stooges, Jonathan Safran Foer would be the third stooge of our three stooges. But I just been translating this Haggadah for years. My point is, I was like, my first translation assignment was to translate the Bible, which is not a good place to start. But I remember I was doing an event with Jonathan Etgar in Jerusalem like 5 years ago, and I remember there was a Haaretz supplement. It was Doug Zahav, which is goldfish in this book. What of this goldfish would I wish? But I just remember, I don't know, it's interesting. Like, his translators are amazing, and the stories are amazing, and I laugh and cry and weep and all that. But it's an interesting idea to think what the brain does when you read. Because I know I was in Mishkanot. I sat in my hotel room and read this story of Etgar's in Hebrew, and I just knew what it sounded like, not in my forget mind, not what it sounded like in my head. I knew what it sounded like in my heart, and I think that's when I had the idea, like, I just wanted to give it the voice that I heard in Hebrew. But the point is, his English is so good and my Hebrew is so bad that it made it a really fun marriage, But I would do those things. It was in that story, it was like, it says like he hit him lightly, and I was like, he hit him really, really hard. And, we'd have these wonderful arguments. But, there's a grand tradition of this, which is another thing is just, I'm glad to see everyone here, and I hope there's just, Shea Stadium for Etgar's writing in the States. But I think of, a very moving story for me is, how did Isaac Bashevis Singer get into English? And it was, Sal Bello is the one who took his first short story and thought, I know what this sounds like in Yiddish. And I just love the tradition. He's so supportive of my work, and we're so supportive of each other in a million ways. And he's made many a speech to me that has just set me straight in my own writing. And it's just, for me to get to be part of the work that way has just been a joy. Anyway, thank you all for having us.